Hi everyone. What I want to do to this video is I want to give you a bit of the understanding and knowledge on what CSS and what it does. So let's get started. You have to remember this like abbreviation. You have to say, hey, what the CSS stands for. Okay. So it's a simple language. I don't really think it's a language, but anyway, say it's a language works alongside with HTML. So the idea of web page is it's the idea of separation of text or information. Separate from format. So what does it mean by that? Well, in your Microsoft Word, all your type content is saved together with your formatting. However, in HTML, they actually try to separate it. So in HTML, information will be delivered by HTML page, but most of the format will be actually created delivered by CSS. So what is CSS has in it? It applies a formatting to any element of a web page or pages. Right? So who does this job? Once you get HTML page from Google or YouTube, that's gonna be HTML page, right? And along with it, most of the time they send you another file called CSS. So what a browser does is holding this HTML with the CSS, they combine together and showing you a proper format. That's what the browser does. And then we call it as a rendering, okay? So why they call it a style sheet? Because it actually has a collection of a CSS rule. So what do you mean by rule? This rule includes all the like sort of the syntax say, hey, this paragraph has to be in this side of a font and then this color and this style. So you can say, yeah, all paragraphs should be this way, all H1 should be this way. But not only that, as you can see as we go from next week, it's all about conditional, which means in this condition, you have to do this. In this condition, you have to do this. It's like if and if and if. But let's look at like what's in the CSS has in it. It has a declaration, property, and value. So there are three components in it. So let's look at those three components in actual example. So this is the actual examples of CSS. So this is declaration, which is like target. So in this specific CSS rule, it's for what? H1, H2, image, table, title, link, image, video, audio, you name it. So you target, hey, this should be in this style. In this example, it says H1, which means it's telling everybody, not people, it's telling all browser saying, all the following rules are for H1 style. Okay, that's declaration. What's property? When you format, there are so many other like properties you can tackle with. In here, for example, you can change the color, you can change the font, you can change the size, you can even add borders and shadows and all these things that you can do with a CSS. We call it as properties. Okay, so I will tell you later on, but this is extremely important that you know what kind of properties are possible for that specific declaration, which is a target. Okay, and value is easy because value is what is like the designated value for it. So in this example, color should be red, which means all H1 should be in color red. And font family, there's like a sum of family of like series of the fonts possible. And font size, it's a 28 pixel. Okay, so that's what Cascade style sheet is. Now let's look at example like here. So rules or style instruction that elements should follow. That's what CSS is about. And as you can see in this PowerPoint slide, you can have a series of style over here. So 3 components, right? This is declaration. So in this case, there are 2 targets. One for the body. Body means entire HTML document. This is also body of in the HTML structure as well. So this is gonna be applied to entire body. And it says, hey, background color should be this linear. And also another target is H1. These are properties. And this blue font is a value, okay? Now, 3 location for CSS. This is a little bit like confusing because of what I said in minutes ago. Didn't I said any server will send HTML along with us CSS. So there will be HTML information coming up. That's like info. With in case of HTML, and your format will be delivered by the CSS, and this two will be combined in browser, right? Now, so what browser does is rendering. I'm repeating what you already, I will say that. Now, where is this CSS coming from? There are 3 locations: internal, external, and inline. And I'm going to explain those 3 very now in a minute. I want you to aware that in terms of popularity or in terms of like frequency of actual use, most of people use external, and not most of people, most of server. I will explain why in a minute, but it's very the core idea of CSS is external. Sometimes you can do internal, but inline we don't do that much. So what do you mean by internal and external? You can say like something is in, something is out. So what do you mean by internal? Internal means this CSS will be delivered as a part of this HTML. Yeah. So what I mean by internal is your CSS information is actually a part of your HTML. So yeah, HTML will deliver your content, which is information, and there are some structure of HTML that will deliver your CSS for you. Okay, what do you mean by external then? Yes, of course, this will be as a file. So this is, let's say this is an index.html, right? But the CSS will be say my style.css. So this is the most of the common case that your server will deliver to you index.html and mystyle.css, for example, and browser will combine these two together in their screen. What is inline? Inline is also part of the HTML, but in case of an internal, even though inside of HTML, this part of that is a content like info, but your CSS is saved. Again, I have to be very precise about it. It's just saved as a part of CSS, but inside of HTML, CSS and actual content is separated. There are specific tag information, text structure called the style. It's gonna be under like head and head tag. So it's not part of your body. It's all CSS will be inside of the CSS. I'm gonna actually more explain on next PowerPoint slide. But That's internal. In internal style, even though it's HTML, inside of everything is inside of HTML, it just separates these two. But inline, all CSS within HTML, this is an info, and CSS is embedded inside of your content, which means it's combined. That is why people don't use it that much, because the idea of separating HTML and CSS inline is not doing that much good job in this. So that's why. So let's look at the external style first. Like I said in my previous PowerPoint slide, it's an idea of separating your content with your formatting, which is the CSS, and all style are located in external file. Okay, external file means it's a name of something .css, and it doesn't really matter what name it is. So let's say in this case, my style.css, right? This is like CSS file. And it can be linked to any numbers of HTML. So what do we mean by this? It means if you have one CSS, it can apply multiple HTMLs. Right? So here's one good example. Think about it. Do you know that Google, time to time, they change the logo of Google, right? There are, based on the holidays and specific season, Google's graphic designer, they come up with a special design for the Google logo, right? Now, once they changed one logo to another, think about this. How many HTML pages do they have? Roughly, you can say million, right? So let's say you have 2 million pages in your server, and whenever you change your logo from A to B, are you gonna go to each individual 2 million page one at a time and change logo individually? That is not gonna happen. That's gonna take so many time and years, and even it's not even efficient at all. But what's happen is if you change over here logo information here, it's gonna apply to 2 million pages instantly. Do you see what I'm saying? All the formatting information is in CSS. If you change over here, it doesn't really matter how many HTML pages you are formatting with this. That is the beauty of a CSS. This is why people use external style of CSS. Why? If you change that specific file, it'll apply to multiple, even up to 2 million HTML pages at the same time, instantly. Okay, so that's why it is a mostly used method, of course, and two parts. One, declaration. Okay, what do you mean by that? There gotta be you gotta have to establish this linkage between your HTML and CSS. It's exactly the same concept whenever you put an image inside of HTML. What did you learn? You have to make a connection between HTML and photo, right? It's just like a linkage. It's not embedded. But what you actually see in HTML is it looks like it's a part of it. Look, not. Never HTML can actually have an image in it, right? It's exactly the same concept. Your CSS should be linked to any HTML page, and where that relationship or declaration is defined or declared is inside of a head and head section. Do you remember this? The very first day of our web development experience, I introduced you guys to, hey, what is the code structure of a blank HTML page? Do you remember that? Open bracket, exclamation mark, right? and then you have like body and head and HTML to closing HTML. So in that head section, you have to put this line. And then you may feel like, well, don't try to memorize this, because this is one of the reasons why we use Dreamweaver. As far as you know which CSS to which HTML you are connecting, Dreamweaver will create all this line for you. So don't worry about it. Even don't be bothered by the idea of memorizing this. But anyway, I want you to know that this connection or declaration is done in the head section. Okay, this is not your content. And then actual CSS rule is external file. So this is your HTML. And then under the head, there is a body, and there will be content there, right? But in the body section, we don't put any CSS information at all. But let's say this is my style.css. Let's say this is actual CSS file. CSS file is text, simple text, like HTML. So here, the declaration, properties, and value. So in here, you're gonna list up all these properties and all this declaration to decorate your file. Okay, and your browser will combine these two files together to properly display. Okay, so one part in HTML, you have to have like declaration, and actual code will be external file. That's external style of a CSS. Internal style is the same idea. Do you remember that? Like when I explained internal style, I actually said that it's a part of the old CSS will be inside of HTML, but CSS goes here and your information goes here. So your information usually starting with the body and closing body. So this CSS will go inside of a head section. Head, and here, closing head. So this head section in external CSS's case, your declaration linkage between your HTML and CSS is located. But in this case, actual CSS will be embedded in that head section. So let's look at this example here. In here, head and closing head. So it's not your body and body, which means it's not your content space. It's for declarations and initializations and everything. Right? And here, you are going to use a style and style. That's another tag that you can use in order to define your CSS. Now, the same rule, you don't have to remember this name, style and closing style, because Dreamweaver will do exactly the same thing for you. Okay. What you need to do is what you to do. Oh, I want to change body background color and H1. That's it. So the same thing, either you put all the CSS information in external file or part of your HTML. That's the only difference between external and internal. But get this, the most important, I would say, characteristic, but at the same time, the limitation of internal style is that all the style you define in head section will only apply in that HTML, which means whatever you define over here will be only applied in the body HTML content. But if you have another HTML here, and let's say there is information here, it's not gonna go this way, not at all. Maybe you may have another CSS over here, and then it'll apply to here. Yes, that's possible. But any CSS in HTML, which means the internal style, it cannot be applied to the other HTML at all. It's just like confined within that document. That's why we call it the internal style. Okay. All right. Now inline, like I said, this is a part of your HTML. Look at here. This H1 style is part of H1 because you remember that you were using the H1 and H1. Before you close the opening H tag here, you put actual CSS style in it. But again, these days, people don't use it at all. It's still gonna work, but if you do that a lot, it's definitely showing you that it's not, you don't know CSS that much. You're not take a big advantage of what CSS is possible. You just like, quick and dirty way of doing it. That's what, let me put it this way. Okay, so it's like mixing content and presentation, which is the formatting. It's not a good idea because why did they want to separate your content with the presentation, which is the formatting? Because by doing separately, they can reduce the amount of the information they have to send it over to the internet. Okay. All right. So what's the benefits of a style CSS? Okay. I know it's a bit very confusing because you don't know still like how to use it or what to use in the CSS. Without knowing what CSS we are talking about in a big picture of what's the benefit of it. Okay, so one, consistency. By using CSS, you can make a consistent change to all page you want. This is particularly true for the external style. Like I said, internal style, it's gonna only stay in the specific documents. Number two, it's gonna bandwidth reduction. So what is bandwidth? It's a bit like an engineering term, but it's almost, not exactly, but almost exact concept of the amount of information you can send over a specific time, like it's a per second or per millisecond, things like that. But anyway, it's like how fast you can actually send it over to the information. Excuse me. So the idea is by separating content from design language, again, this is a format or presentation in my previous slide, you reduce the file size dramatically. So let's say this is HTML and this is a CSS, and your server sent these two files to your browser. By somehow your HTML arrived successfully, but your CSS somehow has a significant delay. Even that case, this is one of the benefits of separating. Your browser can still show actual content. Of course, it's not gonna properly format it, but still you can see the content. So in emergency, yeah, let's say if you have to give up one of these two files, are you gonna give up HTML or CSS? Yeah, definitely you have to give up a CSS because without formatting, you can still deliver content. So this is a primary, not this. CSS is like secondary. So in extreme case, you can do it, but in most of the case, by separating, you can significantly reduce the file size. Search engine. What Google knows is Google send out all this robot to all possible servers in the world and look over what they have in it. That's how Google know which page is about car, which page is about fruit like hobbies and ball state. I will talk a little bit later on in this, but there's just very important and a very promising area called the SEO, search engine optimization, which means whenever you create a page, you should be able to successfully market your page. What if nobody knows your page exists? All your efforts is in vain. So you have to know how to optimize and how to optimally design your HTML page. But anyway, if you separate HTML with your format, the Google search engine will only visit HTML because it's smart enough that it doesn't do the CSS. Why? Because they know it's only format. There's no content in it. So it's better for the search engines. And browser compatibility. Not only that, do you know that these days, if you access the same web page through your computer monitor versus your iPhone versus your iPad, exactly the same web page show differently because there are like limits of the space on specific medium. Say, for example, your phone is a really narrow in width but like longer in height. So before we have the CSS idea, what you have to do is you have to create a 3 separate version. One page for your computer, one entire page, one entire website for your phone, one entire website for iPad or tablet. But think about it. Even you create an entire set of the like your web page with the font has all different sizes. So let's say, are you gonna let's say there are 20 different cell phones in the world. Are you gonna create 20 different versions of it? No, because think about how many different cell phones we have these days. It's over 1,000. You're not gonna be able to do it. So in that scenario, we are taking a full advantage of CSS because CSS is the one that whenever your browser detects, oh, this person is watching this, visiting this website with a computer monitor, they actually reorganize everything by CSS. So there's only one HTML, one website, but all this website will be displayed differently based on your medium, say cell phones and computer. Why? Because CSS. You can manipulate the CSS in that case. So this is a really flexible web surfing experience because of the CSS. All right. Now, 3 things you have to know about CSS. I want you to know this 3 things this way, okay? 1, you have to know how to create a CSS rule. Of course, there are 2 different places. You have to know how to create an internal style, and you have to know how to create external style. So there are 2, internal and external. I will show you with in Dreamweaver, right? When you do that, either external or external style, you can use a CSS panel, which is one of the panel in the right side of your Dreamweaver. I will show you next week. Or you can use your property window. Okay. And then most of the time, I recommend use this one. That's like the standard way of creating your CSS. Once you know how to create, next level is you always know how to modify it. Like I showed you in the example in previous PowerPoint slide, modifying style includes your ability to interpret the actual CSS code by recognizing what? Declaration, properties, and value. So when you go through, oh, this is a rule like for H1, for example, and you should be able to know like, oh, this does this and that and then. Then by this way, you can pinpoint a specific line in there and you can change the value there. Or even you can add up one more properties there. Let's say, well, it doesn't, my H1 doesn't have one, but then I want to add one more property, say shadow there. You can do that. And then third place is how to organize the element in a page. Okay. So by doing it, you have to know how to organize all your stuff, like your content. So you have to know, like exactly when you finish typing your all 20 page of your essay, what you need to do is now you highlight some portion of it, say title, and then you can make a title bold and bigger size. And so fully utilizing CSS, you have to know how to organize elements in a page. Okay. CSS is nothing but a series of instruction on how to format each element. CSS take care of your formatting information. You can put it in the internal and external. And when you do it internal, it's a part of, it can only apply to that specific document, where external CSS can be applied to multiple like HTMLs. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.